Hello, and welcome to Apostolic Teens Podcast. I'm your host, Hudson Livingston. Thanks for joining us.
Well, it's been a while since we recorded a podcast. Don't know quite what we're recording and who we're recording. But, these youngins, they wanted me to get on here and record another episode. It's been about a month, and, anyways, time to take off this disguise and welcome to another Apostolic Teens Podcast. And I know I fooled you with my disguise, but it has been a while. I've gotten older since the last time I recorded. I'm now a month older than I was last time we recorded. That's how long it's been. So, enough with this silliness, because we're limited on time. How much time do we got? Okay, we're good for a little bit, so I can hang out with y'all for a little bit. Okay. My Apostolicians. Anyways, let's dive right up into the topic, because actually I'm going to give y'all a second to stop laughing. And I will have notes. Forgive me. Usually do not. But let's read a verse and then we'll talk about what we're going to talk about for today's talk and discussion. Genesis 4, verse 3, and we'll read through verse 3. And in process of time it came to pass that Cain brought of the fruit of the ground an offering unto the Lord. And Abel he also brought of the firstlings of his flock and of the fat thereof. And the Lord had respect unto Abel and to his offering. But unto Cain and to his offering he had not respect. And Cain was very wroth, like chicken broth, and his countenance fell. It means he became sad. And the Lord said unto Cain, Why art thou wroth like chicken broth? And why is thy countenance fallen? If thou dost well, shalt thou not be accepted? And if thou dost not well, sin lieth at the door. And unto thee shall be his desire, and thou shalt rule over him. Anyways, for you New King James Version people, verse 6, verse 5, verse 6, and verse 7 basically means Cain's offering was not accepted. And Cain was angry. And I said he was sad, but that's, it says he was angry and his countenance had fallen. That doesn't mean necessarily he was sad, but he was upset. And the Lord asked him, Why are you mad and why are you upset and ill, as we Southerners like to say? He says, why are you being mad? Because if you would have done well, your offering would be accepted. And if thou doest not well, sin lieth at the door. And he'll do to you sin will do to you whatever he does desire. Cain's very emotional in this passage. And as we see in verse 8, it says, And Cain talked with Abel his brother. This is mainly what I'd like to focus on. And it came to pass, when they were in the field, that Cain rose up against Abel his brother, and slew him. Now, I get mad at my sister sometimes, but I've never done this yet. Just kidding. And the Lord said unto Cain, Where is Abel thy brother? And he said, I know not. Am I my brother's keeper? And he said, "What hast thou done? The voice of thy brother's blood crieth unto me from the ground." And we'll stop there. He's basically cursing Cain from that point on, uh, until about verse 15. And then Cain went out from the presence of the Lord, verse 16. Anyways, short way of putting it is, Cain let his emotions get the best of him. Pretty good. He went so far as to kill his brother. I haven't killed my sibling yet, and I do not intend to kill her. So I will never kill her. Anyways, that's not the point. Point today that I would like to talk about is letting emotions control you. So, oftentimes, I found myself in angering situations, things that make me angry. And in that situation, you have to try to restrain your anger. I've been in situations where, it wasn't necessarily anger, but it may have been disappointment. Or worry, and sort of, I don't know what would be another word for disappointment that does not necessarily mean disappointment. Regret. That maybe things could have went better or anything. But I've been in several situations like that, and it's hard to not let your emotions get the best of you. Now, before this podcast, Alyssa recommended, she had something that was really good, and she pointed out, she said, if you fill your mind with the things of God, the more you'll speak the things of God and not speak things evil. And just something to add on to that, I can tell what you're thinking right now. No, I'm just kidding. I can tell what you're thinking if you are talking to me, because the Bible talks about that if you can tell what's in somebody's heart by the things that they're speaking. If you're speaking evil and vile things as an apostolic teenager, and I've heard many apostolic teenagers do this, and this is not another episode of putting apostolic 21st century saints on the whipping block. We're going to encourage today. But if you're speaking those things, I'm just wondering what you're listening to. If you're talking about these certain topics, I'm wondering what you're watching. And so flippantly, I've seen people speak it so flippantly. And that just lets me know what's in your heart. But at the same time, there's many apostolic teens, on the other hand, that are so on fire for God that you'll never hear a cross word, as the grandparents would say, come out of their mouth. And it's all positive. I know a lot of all positive people. Sadly, I'm not one of those yet, because I'm very negative sometimes. But I try to be positive. But, the things they speak, your conscience is comfortable around them, and you can not have to worry about, well, should I have walked away? Because they're speaking things that are good, and that's how you know what is on their heart. If your normal tendency in a conversation is to go toward, let's just take it as the problems of today. If your conversation automatically goes to perversion as an apostolic team, because I've heard it, And if your conversation automatically goes to perversion, and it's not just necessarily apostolic struggle with I'm not saying apostolic struggle with it. It is a thing of our generation. The people in the world are struggling with it. That's why we have gender dysphoria. Is because people follow their heart and are perverted. That's why you gotta have the Holy Ghost. But anyways, if that's what automatically comes up into your conversation, I know that your thinking is perverted. So if you are speaking to me, we're not doing another podcast about thoughts. Now I'm going to tie this into emotions. If you're speaking to me in an argument and I'm trying to read you, and all of a sudden you start lifting up your voice and you're, and not like that, but you know what I mean, like, you're a doofus. Then I know what you're thinking. You're very angry and I've gotten you upset. And if I am not a good person, then I'm going to take that to my advantage. I may just take it to my advantage anyways, because it's an argument, and I have to control my emotions as well. There's two parties in the argument, sometimes three, sometimes. Anyways, if you start spewing out things, then you mean those things. If you say, well, Hudson, you're a doofus, you mean it. You can't go back and say, well, I didn't mean that, Hudson. Yes, you did. Because that here we go back to that. What you speak is what is in your heart and what you think and believe. If you're mad at me and you don't want me to know, don't lash out. That's one thing. Control your emotions. In public, if the waitress, here's a good example. If the waitress spills your drink on you, I don't know. Let's come up with a better example. If the waitress brings you your food and her ponytail is in your pasta, that's bad. But you can't. You can show your frustration, but you're apostolic, and you've got to remember who you represent. You represent your church, your pastor, and God, most importantly. And if you're like, hey, you terrible waitress, your hair is in my food. And, she's like, oh, I'm so sorry. And you just continue to press this. And then you're like, well, I'm not even going to leave her a tip. Okay, that's a whole nother subject. But you just let your anger get way too far out there. And, we could go on forever on just anger. But it's everything. Many people let their emotions run their lives. And if we're not careful, I can be just the same way. I can let frustration rule my life and create an emotional stronghold in my brain. Okay, not literally. There isn't castles and walls in my brain. But there is learning walls because I'm not very smart. No, I'm just kidding. But I like to think that I am normal, average. It creates strongholds in your brain though. People just run around killing people because they're mad. Because somebody's done something to them and they had anger about it. And guess what? That anger turned into rage and bitterness. That's why there are serial killers oftentimes. Because they've been wronged and they're just trying to find justice. That's not always the case. And I'm not saying that there's outliers. And I'm not saying that that is the dominant way. But a lot of them, they are hurt. And a lot of people in this world are hurt. A lot of people in the church are hurt. And whenever somebody speaks to you in a raised voice, don't necessarily take it as they're just mad at me. You have to think, why are they talking like this? And if you don't, you'll catch yourself doing it the same way and hurting them again. Don't base your reaction just off what they're doing. Because you can often find yourself hurting them and pushing them right back out the doors. That's why we have to control our emotions. In our text, Cain killed his brother. Okay, that's huge. Why? Because his countenance had fallen, and he was angry, and his anger turned. His anger turned into rage and bitterness against his brother. It wasn't his brother's fault that, just side trail, it wasn't his brother's fault that he had a bad sacrifice. His brother was just staying in his lane, just doing what he knew was right. And Cain was doing what he knew was not right. He knew that he was not bringing the best before the Lord. And the Lord knew this. This is why God said, if you would have brought the best, you would have been accepted. And Cain knew this. And God warned him, and he said, sin's lying at your door right now. It's waiting for you. When you open that door to the person that says pizza delivery, he's going to jump in and attack you and use you, because that's what God said. He said, whenever sin gets a hold of you, he's going to do with you what he will. Whatever he can do. Cain just ignored this. He didn't ignore the preacher. He ignored God himself. That's how much we can let emotions control us, is that we begin to ignore God himself speaking to us through his word, and we can get offended at what God has spoken. And if we had a Bible bomb, we would put that there. Just kidding. But Colin, don't put a Bible bomb in there. But anyways, Cain let his emotions control him. And I have written down something. I wrote this down a long time ago. So this is just a passage I wrote concerning the Civil War. Okay, so this is quoting Dr. Hudson Livingston. No, I'm just kidding. With the election of Abraham Lincoln as President of the United States in 1860, events affecting national unity began to develop rapidly. South Carolina legislature immediately voted to secede from the Union. Other states quickly followed. Interesting fact, Mississippi seceded from the Union on January 9th, 1861. And Alyssa, wake up. No, I'm just kidding. As soon as Senator Jefferson Davis, a Mississippian, heard the news, he resigned his post in the U.S. Senate. Davis made a very moving farewell speech from the Senate floor. The nation was largely controlled by emotion. Groups of individuals on both sides, the Democrats or the Republicans, were ablaze with hatred toward one another. Abolitionists hated the South and levied exaggerated and unfair charges against all Southerners. And the Southerners were basically the opposite. They were for slavery and other things. And the Southerners, with the lack of flexibility and dogmatic replies, their dogmatic replies only added to their inflamed emotions. No party of the United States was in the right at this time. Even though the Republicans had good causes, they still held to them with bitterness. In February of 1861, representatives from the 11 seceding states met in Montgomery, Alabama. The Confederate States of America organized its government and elected Jefferson Davis, how convenient, as its first and only president. Many pastors tried to intervene to prevent what appeared to be inescapable war. Bishop Robert Payne of the Methodist denomination made a trip to Richmond, Virginia, in order to see Confederate President Jefferson Davis. Bishop Payne initially tried to convince to Mr. Jefferson of the hopelessness of the Southern causes. However, his wise counsel was politely refused. All voices of reason were drowned out in the charge of the political atmosphere of the nations. And it seems as if in the 1860s, emotion ran our government, and this led to war. The Northerners, the Republicans at that time, they're not Republicans now, but they were, had a hatred for slavery, and rightly so. Slavery is wrong. But how they held to these beliefs is how we often sidetrail, as apostolics can be dogmatic and hating of the other people. Like, we don't believe in being drunk, but we don't hate drinkers. Well, that's how the North was toward Southerners. They hated Southerners and what they believed. We got to be careful that we just hate what they believe and not who they are. But the Southerners were the same way. They hated the belief of not having slaves because they knew they would need it. They thought that they would need it for their industry and for the economy. So, them with their wrong beliefs had strong emotion toward the Northerners. And so this caused war, okay? On a personal level, we can cause war with our emotions. Between each other, we can cause war. And that's sort of what I wanted to hop on for today. Just to talk about, as teenagers, especially with this stage of life we're in, it can easily be easy to easily let your emotions easily take over in our stage of life. Youth groups are often not split, but taking sides because of these strong emotions. And, a way to keep that from happening and allowing new converts to have a safe place to have fun youth events or anything, because they're not expecting to come in and seeing a fist fight. Now, I'm not trying to be specific, like a fist fight at a youth night. They want to come in and it not be like public school. They wanted to come in and feel safe and peace. So let's not let our emotions take over. Well, that's all I wanted to say. And we'll see you in about a year, because that's just how long it's going to take for the next one.
Thanks for joining us today on Apostolic Teens Podcast. We hope you've enjoyed this episode. And I think that's it. So we'll see you next time here on Apostolic Teens Podcast.